Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
Every time I open a pull request and send it to you, Aaron, it's like a little gift that I'm giving you. And I could just putting myself in your shoes, like you get that email and you're like, oh yeah, this is the highlight of my day. Is that a pretty accurate assumption of how you receive those?
Exactly. When I see a pull request, I'm like, oh yeah, it's time for code review. Yes.
And even better, like what if there's like 10 of them and like some of them are really big? Like you love that.
Well, I'll tell you what happens. There's a lot of times when we get that really big one. It just depends on who did the development and how they review it. But one of the things that you do, I've noticed to make code reviews easier is you'll go and make a bunch of changes, but then you'll do atomic commits. You'll say like this is a commit that encompasses all the functionality for XYZ, and then you move on and you move on. And I know that because you do that yourself, you also sort of leverage that when you do code reviews, right?
I do sometimes. I do sometimes. I don't always. It does depend on the size of the pull request. So I want to give a tangible example because there's a couple different types of pull requests you get from me. Like I think our
Sure.
workflow might be a little unique. So we obviously there's the code, right? We're working on a feature and a project, you review it. But with our educational work, we have like the daily newsletter, we have a book on validation, and those go through content review as well, which involve pull requests. So I just did a fairly hefty revision to one of those books, and so it was like a lot. There was tests that go with the content, so there was code, but there was also like prose, right? Like writing, describing how validation works, and like code samples within that. And so the reason I bring that up is because like when I get a pull request, I'm thinking mainly in code.
Hmm.
And that's where I think atomic commits help. But I did also use atomic commits on the content, updated this particular rule, updated this for Laravel 12, whatever, like to just kind of describe it. But I know you don't look at it that way. So is it even still useful for me to do that? Like to see the commits, even if you don't review it commit by commit?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions there. So we kind of muddied the water when you talked about like, well,
Right.
this is for Laravel 12 or whatever. We want to have good commit messages. And we want to bring them forward, and we want to have every commit make sense in the context of itself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not necessarily about packaging stuff. So when I talked about those larger commits, I think what maybe you did this, maybe you didn't, doesn't matter. But you maybe had your branch and you branched off of that, did 6 or 7 little things committing along the time,
Mm,
and squash merged it back into the main branch, the feature branch, and said, this is this is a commit for XYZ feature.
yeah.
And so you kind of mentioned like that's kind of how you do it for larger things.
Right.
So it sounds like you were doing that for maybe for the reviewer. How would you make use of that though?
Yeah. So this is where I find it useful as the reviewer. So you're questioning me about my review, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
question
Yeah.
you about your review. But we're going to get back to you, Eric. So
Mhm.
for me, when I look at a pull request that's a little larger, and especially if within the pull request, let's just say it's a feature, we also bumped a version of PHP unit, right? So like a bunch of tests got updated, and it's like mechanical changes, right? Like instead of the data providers being an annotation, now they're attributes or whatever it is. So if there's like a bunch of files touched, and within there's a feature change, then that's when I like to look at the commits. And so because I can isolate it. Like this one commit might have 300 changed files, but it's all the same thing. So now I can scan that, and like my eye is sort of looking for those patterns, and I'm only looking for the things that kind of jump out. Like, whoa, why is that different than the other one? Why is there 2 blank lines after that instead of one, or some, whatever it is. But generally speaking, the feature I do review holistically as a PR, file by file, not commit by commit. Does that explain it? Like that my decision for when I switch to the commit by commit review mode?
Yeah, it does. So my challenge or question about that would be when you are looking through that and you've put your mind into a specific mode for a specific commit,
Yeah,
haven't you narrowed the focus of your brain then?
I
Because if
have.
you're saying there's only things in this commit for this feature, you might actually tell your brain to ignore something else that's snuck into that commit, or you might not notice it. I
Um,
mean, I know what you're saying. You might notice
yeah,
it because it's not of the description,
right.
But
Yeah.
I'd say that people tend to shut off their brain when they focus on something. I mean, it goes both ways. Some you might
Yeah.
notice the outlier. Others, if you're focusing on one thing, that's the only thing you notice. So if the code, if the test was, or if the PR was change all the tests from, at test to test, as camel case or something,
Yeah.
you might miss that you changed a couple other things inside of one of the functions because you're just scanning for looking at those function names to make sure they make sense.
That's not how my brain works, but I could see that argument. For me, the fact
Right.
that I've narrowed my focus actually makes me more hyper aware of anything that's outside what I'm expecting. So if I'm really expecting just like you said, snake case to camel case or whatever, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden like there's 100 of those, and then number 75 changed a variable name in the test, I'm like, whoa, why did that happen? That doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
So, but it's very specific. It's like it's when an atomic commit is really supposed to be one thing. If it's like, oh, this commit is I refactored tests, and some of it is like changing the name, some of it is changing attributes, and some of it is tidying up test logic. Like that probably wouldn't even look at that commit in isolation at that point because it's not really atomic in my view. Then it's doing too many things.
Let me hammer at this one thing one more time before I tell you how I work.
Good.
I would say that I think you're putting some trust into the developer, then that they're categorizing their changes,
Yeah.
and you're allowing them to put your focus in specific places.
I
Whereas the
am.
point of the code review is that I catch things that you aren't thinking about. So
Mm,
if you're constructing a set of stuff and you're saying focus on this as a developer to your reviewer, and then they follow that path, isn't that just you looking at it again?
mm,
I
I
mean,
don't.
no, it's not. But I mean, there
Yeah.
is like I don't like when someone comes and says to me as a reviewer, "Here's what I want you to review." It's like, well, then do it yourself.
I know I get what you're saying, and I think it's I can see a parallel, but I think there is a distinction. So like
Mhm.
what you just said, I would put something in a PR note like, hey, this thing here, pay special attention to that, or here, I might get ahead of it. Here's
Yeah.
why I did this. I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't take an instruction like that and be like, oh, well, that's all I'm going to look at. So I get what you're
Mhm.
saying. Like with the commit, I am sort of adopting that mindset of like, this is the main thing I'm going to look at. But I would just tweak it a little bit and say, this is the thing I'm expecting. I'm still looking at everything. But yeah, it's very subjective. Yeah. Because even
Yeah.
even what makes an atomic commit is a subjective thing too. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule.
I think this is a great example. You said a really cool phrase just in
Mm,
passing, which is that's not how my brain works,
it's not.
and that's great because we need to, as developers, recognize that we're doing the same coding maybe, but our brains may work differently.
Yeah.
And so we're accomplishing the same things. The end result, even some of the path might be the same, but the way we travel that path, maybe Joe likes to skip down the path and I like to walk. There's all kinds of different ways to get there. And so the reason I thought that was interesting is you're like, my brain doesn't work that way. And I'm just over here screaming, mine does, you know? And so
Yeah.
you asked me how I do code reviews. I look at the feedback from the PR note. So, like, if you want to focus on this, or I did this, or whatever,
Yeah.
I'll do that. I'll do something strange, as I might not even read the ticket that's for until after I've done all the
Mm,
review. And I'll tell you because here's how my brain works.
okay.
Maybe it's different, but Tetris,
I
the
do.
game Tetris. And so,
Absolutely.
as you're building your Tetris board, there is this idea that, you can put down different shapes and they kind of fit in. And like, I need a long four square
Yeah.
thing. So I'm building everything on the right, waiting for that one to come from the left and whatnot. And so you have this idea in your head that as new blocks come in, you fit them into a picture. And that picture continues to grow and grow. And then some comes in and maybe that lowers the picture, it changes the picture, the couple lines go away, etc. But you continue to build on top of it. And so that's how my brain works is when I look at code review, I don't look at like specific commits or whatever. I just start from the logical top, which is almost all sort of alphabetical, but sometimes I'll jump around. Like
Yeah.
I'll start in the controllers and then I'll just look at all the controllers. And the way my brain works is as long as I'm not interrupted and I can specify like I have 10 minutes for this,
Yeah.
I can keep all those things in my brain. And so I'll look at all the controllers and then I'll give feedback on there. If there's something I don't know, I might put like a temporary comment, say like, look back at this. And so I
Mm,
haven't submitted that comment, but I'll put a temporary one there. and then I'll go down, I'll find the answer, and I'll delete that temporary comment if it no longer makes sense, or I'll leave it there if it did make sense. I might even edit the comment and be like, well, in the original comment, it might say something like, will this work with XYZ? And then later on, I discovered that model. I might go back to the comment and put another comment on there saying, I checked the model and it doesn't appear that this would work. And so that's how my brain works is I look at the entire thing and I start to build like a Tetris. And so I don't want to be focused. I want my brain to do the focusing for me.
Yeah.
And so when someone says focus on this, that's when I get frustrated because I'm like,
Yeah.
but I don't want you to lead me that way because my brain doesn't work that way.
Right.
I think some of the beauty of us having different brains, just developers in general, is like I said, we're all going towards the end result, but we get there different ways. And so we get to discover different things along the way, different ways of coding, different bugs that might have come up, whatever. So when you try to focus someone too much on a code review, like me, they might miss the things that they would have caught otherwise.
Yeah. There's a couple of things you said there that I liked. So the first one that really resonated with me was actually leaving yourself notes in the PR process. I've never done that, but now that you say it, it seems obvious because it does batch them. It's not like
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time.
that's great. It's like a little sticky note as you're going through the code. Um, the other thing too, I realized the downside, the thing I've bumped into trying to do like atomic commit review is sometimes there is a bug in that commit and the developer finds it later. So you're like, oh, you forgot to validate this, or you didn't account this should be in a transaction. And like a later
Mhm.
commit, they did that, right? So like
Yeah.
that is a problem. And I would say honestly, like less than 10%, maybe 5% of the time I look at them commit by commit. But there are some cases where it's like big global style changes or refactors or things. I
Yeah. Yeah.
do still kind of like that, but I think your way makes more sense, Aaron. And I
Well, I don't know if it makes more sense. It's just that's the way my brain works again. Because
yeah.
when you mentioned a huge refactor and then like look at a atomic commit, in my brain, that is useful information that I might forget if I go commit by commit.
Yeah.
And so if I'm looking at it all at once, I now can put myself a little bit in this sounds so silly, but the emotions of the developer as well.
Mm,
Like, look at all this stuff they're changing. And so if I was changing all that stuff, what are areas where I might make a mistake? And so realizing it's not necessarily in the area that I'm working on, but if my task is 80% refactoring something, 20% doing a task, and I see a pull request of 80% refactoring, 20% code, that tells me right away that I'm going to look at that 20% code really much more in depth. And I
yeah.
only know that because of the ratio of one giant PR. But if it's individual, I might not notice, I might not remember or I might not
True.
notice.
I like when you said emotions because there have been times because we'll do an interactive code review sometimes where
Hmm.
like you leave all your comments and then instead of like going back and forth, we'll just look at all the comments together. And you'll be like, yeah, Joel, I could tell you were just getting like frustrated here, or it was getting
All
late in the
right.
day. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right, Aaron. Dang it. How'd you know that? I have a question for you, Aaron, and you have to not react badly to it.
Okay.
Because I know you don't like cheese, but this is a cheese related question, but you don't have to enjoy cheese to answer this. This is like a more philosophical question about food in general.
Okay.
So I was at a cheese store and they had a section with like aged cheeses. Like that's a thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like wine, like ooh, an aged or steak,
I
an
actually
aged.
I know a lot more about cheese probably than the average person because
Okay.
people like attack me with cheese
I know, that's
because I
why I'm
don't like
very
cheese. And they're just like, well, have you tried this cheese? Like, I've learned everything. Like,
yep.
well, have you tried this XYZ cheese? I'm like, no, but also I don't want it.
Yeah. That's why
Anyway.
I'm being very cautious with this question because it's not that
Okay.
at
Okay.
all.
Okay. Okay.
All right,
Ooh,
so there's an aged cheddar, 18 years old. It was like, I want to say like $100 a pound, and it was like in little bricks, small pieces. But so I'm like, wow. So that this cheese, we're recording this in 2025. That was from like 2007. Wow, that's older than my kid, that was standing there with me. But then like on the line underneath it, it said sell by January 2026. And I'm like, it goes bad. Like it's fine for 18 years, but if it goes like a few months more, like throw it out, it's bad. Then right next to it, there was a 20-year cheese. I'm like, so clearly cheese can go to 20 years. What is your take on that? Why would there be, for an aged product, why would there be a sell by date? That's my conundrum that I'm trying to solve.
because you age stuff differently than you package it for selling.
Say more about that.
Well, I assume that when they age cheese, it's not in that original package. I assume it's in a giant block in some
Oh,
sort of warehouse with all the other sad cheeses, spending its life in there, just hanging out, going like, "I wish someone would eat me." And the other cheese says, "Quiet, just hang there." And so
okay.
when they finally bring them out, it's a giant block of hard cheese of age 18 years that kind of has a little bit of dog hair on it, rolls down the
Oh
the,
my.
the driveway, and the guy pulls it out, starts scraping off the outside, chunks off little bits, puts it in the plastic, and says, "Yeah, that'll probably last a year. Eat that."
That you paint a very vivid picture, and I hope that's not what happens. But I think you actually explained it for me. So yeah, it's aged in a special room. It's part of like a bigger, I don't know, cheese comes in wheels or something, like a bigger structure. But once you cut it out, and now it's on the refrigerator in the store. Okay, I think you sold me.
Yeah. You want someone to just stop talking about code review and actually do it for you?
That's a service we offer. If you're interested in having us look at your code, head over to masteringlaravel.io and schedule a call with us or use the contact form.